As God has been adding to the building blocks of understanding that he's revealed regarding the image of the beast, regarding the mark of the beast, regarding the beast itself, and Babylon the Great, it's been important for us to review the things that we already know so that we can incorporate this new understanding. Now, this is not unfamiliar. It shouldn't be unfamiliar. You learned about numbers. You learned how to count. And then you learned how to add them together and how to subtract them and multiply and divide. Then you learned algebra. This is the nature of learning. And so it shouldn't surprise you that this is the way that God is teaching us. It shouldn't surprise you that the concrete concepts that he established in the Old Testament, when he says in the New Testament, now this is the fulfillment. Now this is what you're supposed to understand about this in the spiritual realm. He established concrete, literal circumcision where flesh is being cut away from other flesh in order for you to understand that your heart is supposed to be cut away from sinful desire, from the sinful flesh. He even refers to it as flesh because you understand what flesh is. And indeed, God being God has established these things. It's not like he's just taking something that already exists. He established these things in order to teach us spiritual understanding. So this evening in our Bible study, we were talking about this, about what God has been doing lately, that he's been having me give these summaries of what he has revealed, of what we understand in Scripture, and then he'll bring something in, and we'll incorporate that into our understanding, and then he'll bring something else in. And I told you in a couple of videos that that's what he was doing, and I didn't really understand why. Now I understand why. Because what he's doing is pausing for a moment to say, now let's review what we've learned. Okay, now let me add this piece in so that you can understand that. And so more recently, he's been talking with me about the fall of the United States, the image of the Antichrist, which is counterfeit Israel. He's also had me talking a bit about the Antichrist kingdom. Now, that's what I'm going to focus on in this video, because a question came up tonight in Bible study regarding the Antichrist. Actually, a few questions came up. One being, how is this Babylon the Great going to fall? And I think inherent in this whole question is also the idea of what is Babylon the Great as differentiated from Babylon, as differentiated from the Antichrist? And also, what does it mean that Babylon the Great is going to fall? Because some people were of the understanding that Babylon the Great was going to be destroyed. And there's a difference between Babylon the Great falling versus Babylon the Great being destroyed. I want to point this out for you in Scripture. There's a kingdom that we're told in Revelation 17 that has fallen, and we know that that's the fifth kingdom, and then it's going to rise again later on, and it's going to be the eighth. So that kingdom, as being described as falling, was not destroyed. It still actually had power, but a different kingdom had greater power. And then you can see that it slowly started to rise up again in recent days. Until next year, it will reign. So falling does not mean you've been destroyed. Even if you fall, you know that you can get up again. You know that when the word talks about you falling, it is not saying that you've been destroyed, but you will. If you continue to live there, you will be destroyed. So where does destruction take place? Destruction takes place when the Antichrist and the false prophet are thrown into the lake of burning sulfur. But we need to define that destruction, because counterfeit Christianity defines this as like you cease to exist or something. You know, that's not such a big deal, really. If you think about it, like, okay, well, I'm just going to do it up here in this life, then I'm going to cease to exist. No big deal, no consequence. But that's actually not the truth. No one is ceasing to exist. You need to understand that the word says that those who are thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, the smoke of their torment is going to rise forever and ever. There is no option to just cease to exist. Even when the word talks about destruction, you need to understand what that destruction means. That destruction means eternal torment. So at what point does this happen, where Babylon falls? We need to distinguish between Babylon the Great, Babylon as a whole, and the Antichrist. Babylon the Great is the harlot riding the beast. That is papal Rome, which started counterfeit religion, specifically counterfeit Christianity. Counterfeit Judaism bore out of this harlot as well. And I've described that in other videos. A couple things that I talk about is, where did Saturday Sabbath come from? They got that from their harlot mother. Where did all of these additions to God's calendar come from? Leap year, New Year, Rosh Hashanah, New Year, Tishrei, the month of Tishrei, that's a Babylonian name. That's not the name that God used. The name is Ephanim for the 7th month on his calendar. I don't know if I said leap year, but they've added a leap year. They've added a second calendar, a creation calendar. None of these things existed in the Bible. There's one calendar. It starts with Aviv or Nisan. There is an understanding in God's word that there are date-specific holy days and there are season-specific holy days. So there is a quote-unquote calendar that is seasonal or a cycle of seasons, but there's only one calendar that God established. So what has happened with those calling themselves Jews and claiming to be practicing Judaism today is that they have prostituted God's calendar to the Gregorian calendar of Rome. Well, when you start doing that, when you start worshiping something else or following in the footsteps of something else other than God, that is your parent. That is your master. That is the one you belong to. So when I say that Judaism as you see it today bore out of Babylon the Great, that's what I mean. They continue in her prostitutions. They are, as Revelation 17:5 describes, one of her prostitute daughters. Now, one thing that I think is important to mention is that this is a divided kingdom. And if you've ever seen daughters who hate their mother, that's exactly what's going on here. And the mother is not too fond of the daughters either. God talked about a divided kingdom. He said a divided kingdom will not stand. God does not have infighting in his church. I've heard pastors say that there's infighting in the church or in his church, and they don't realize that what they are in is a prostitute if that's what's going on, because that does not go on in God's church. God says if you have hatred in your heart toward a brother or sister, the love of God is not in you, and therefore you don't belong to him. You are not part of his church. These prostitutes are not his church. Babylon the Great has prostitute daughters. In Revelation 17:5, it says that the name written on her is Babylon the Great, the mother of all prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. So you should understand Babylon the Great as the harlot riding the beast. That is papal Rome. Papal being the church part of it, the woman part of it, Rome being the beast part of it, the government or system. That is Babylon the Great. And Babylon the Great, by the way, loves to tout this OG status, like they're the OG, they claim to be the OG church, which is ridiculous because Jesus started his church. And they misinterpret scripture to say that actually Peter was going to start his church, and so they claim that Peter was the first pope. And I've explained to you recently that when Jesus said, "Your name is Peter, and on this rock I will build my church," it was within the context of Peter declaring Jesus to be the Son of God. He was the first one to declare Jesus to be the Son of God. And what Jesus was saying is, on that faith, on that foundation, on that understanding and belief, I will build my church. And the way that he responded to Peter was, "Blessed are you, Peter, because you didn't receive that from yourself. You received that from the Father." And then he followed that up with, "On this rock, I will build my church. And you are Peter," meaning rock. "And on this rock, I will build my church." Because Peter was representing the first person to be able to have those eyes to see that Jesus was the Son of God. All that to say is Jesus started his church. The first Christians did not occur in 33 AD or whenever it was that harlot was started. The first Christians were those who believed in Jesus, and they were the church. And they're talked about all throughout the New Testament. When Constantine came around and started Catholicism, He first of all established an image, and that image is of the cross. You know, that so-called symbol of Christianity in the world. What? One of the first things God said was, don't set up an image. Constantine claimed to have received a vision from Jesus telling him to set up an image, and by this image you will conquer. Nope, I don't think so. That did not happen. Constantine was merely interested in power, in political power, and it was convenient for him to gain the support of so-called Christians, counterfeit Christians. And ever since that time, people have been claiming to be Christian and prostituting themselves to all of the things that this harlot started. Christmas, Easter, replacing God's Passover, one of the most important holy days of our existence when he extended the covenant and died for our sins. We changed that to Easter and we call it Christian? I don't think so. The first Christians were Jews, and they did not sit around saying, well, now that we're Christian, we should probably desecrate God's holy days and change them to something else and add some new ones in. And while we're at it, why don't we add idolatry in there and start worshiping other gods? Because Christmas is based on their false god Mithras. Easter is based on their false god Ishtar, who is referred to as Ashtoreth in the Bible. What an absolutely disgusting thing to do with God's holy days. Okay, but the Antichrist changes God's set times, or attempts to change God's set times. All right, so we have Babylon the Great, we've got down. We know who that is. That is the harlot Catholic Church. Babylon in total is Babylon the Great and those who bore out of her. The Antichrist is a kingdom. First of all, the Antichrist is the spirit of Satan. We know that. And many Antichrists have come. And those are his children. And the Antichrist of the end is a kingdom. And that's been demonstrated in Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Revelation 13, and Revelation 17. It is a kingdom that started with the harlot Catholic Church and continues in the prostitutes that bore out of her. It is a kingdom that denies Christ. It is anti-Christ. It denies his authority. It has the appearance of godliness but denies his power. It denies his sovereignty. It denies that he can heal. And not only that he can heal, but he is the only one who heals. Why am I talking about that so much? Because there are three main things that God spoke to me about when he first called me to himself. And that was that he was angry with the churches, education, and science. And what does science do? Specifically medicine. What does it do? It claims that it heals while denying that you have a creator, claiming that you evolved and that those gods are going to heal you. My Bible says that if you deny Jesus, who is the creator, that is fundamentally anti-Christ. My Bible also says that the Antichrist is going to perform many wonders or false wonders and false signs. And medicine does that every day. Our covenant with God is partly predicated on this understanding that he is sovereign and that when he starts sending afflictions to us or he starts harming the earth, that we're going to look at that and go, oh, I need to return to God. I must be sinning right now. I need to go return to God. I need to repent. I need to examine myself. I need to listen to what he has to say. What does science do? Oh no, never mind all that. Our science is going to fix everything. Our science is going to fix global warming. I mean, good luck with that. Whatever luck is anyway. The agenda of the Antichrist is that it will do anything to keep you from returning to God. And you know what? Seems like that's the heart of people these days, that they will do anything. They will dole out all of their money. Just don't make me submit to God. Tell me what my itching ears want to hear. Give me a pill to make it go away. Anything to return to God and his truth. He spoke with me about the churches, which should be face valid to you, why he's upset with the churches, because these are the prostitutes that bore out of her. And they are the Antichrist, and they deny his power and his sovereignty, and they claim to be in him. That is also Antichrist. Now, I want to tell you something about that. They have an image. They have an image that they worship, and it is called Israel. And it's very odd, because the word says that Israel are God's people. that not all who are descended from Israel are Israel. Not all who are descended from Abraham are Abraham's children, and that a Jew is not one who is one outwardly through circumcision, but inwardly through circumcision of the heart. So it's a little odd that they look outside of themselves to some sort of Israel that they've set up as an image and a Messiah to bear their covenant for them, as though they're not going to experience the persecution of the Antichrist. Or more specifically, as we learn in Revelation 13, the persecution of the image of the Antichrist, the very thing that they are worshiping. How is that for irony? Now, where does that image fit in? Because the word says that the false prophet and the Antichrist are going to be thrown into the lake of burning sulfur. What about the image? Well, the image is of the Antichrist. So it's part of the Antichrist. And that is what you're seeing right now in Zionism, in Jewish Zionism. That is the image of the Antichrist. Zionist Christians are worshiping that. What does the word say about that? Let's read. Revelation 14, verse 9. A third angel followed them and said in a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and its image and receives its mark on their forehead or their hand, if anyone worships the beast and its image and receives its mark on their forehead or their hand. Well, Revelation 13 tells us that that image requires them to receive that mark on their forehead or their hand and to worship it or to die. If anyone worships the image and the beast and its image and receives its mark on their forehead or their hand, they too will drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength into the cup of his wrath. They will be tormented with burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment will rise temporarily? No, forever and ever. There will be no rest, day or night, for those who worship the beast and its image, or for anyone who receives the mark of its name. You know what's scary? I know people who are doing this right now. I know people who are worshiping that image right now. That is outright scary. Scary. They've heard what God has me saying on the channel. They clearly do not have a heart for truth. They have supposedly worshiped with us or joined us for our Sabbath assemblies, and this is what they accuse me of being anti-Semitic. Well, I guess God is too, because I'm speaking on his word. No, God is not. He talks about these people in Revelation 2 and 3 and lets us know that there are people who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. And in Revelation 3, he says he's going to make them bow down at the feet of his people and acknowledge that he has loved them. Because what's happening is that they're claiming that they're the chosen people and that we somehow hate God's chosen people. And therefore, I'm sure the narrative is going to be that we're of the devil in some form or another. I'm not going to add to the scroll, but what I'm looking at is what happened when the Antichrist rose the first time. Now, what is the Antichrist? It's this whole kingdom. It includes the beast, Babylon the Great, and the prostitutes that bore out of her. It also doesn't actually include the false prophet, because the false prophet is obviously worshiping this and has actually had two purposes. The false prophet of the United States has had two purposes. One is to testify to the Antichrist. The other is to set up its image. So technically, they are all Antichrist. Now, let me go over the third thing that the Lord spoke to me about when he first called me to himself, and that was education. This system of education that has been mandatory. And you think about this, because I raised my daughter this way too. She went to outside school system. I did not school her at home. And as I think back, I have pled with her, don't send my grandson to regular school. Teach him at home, because we're supposed to be teaching our children about the Lord. That's what should be on their forehead and their right hand all the time. Not this busy work nonsense that the world has set up of mandatory education where you drop your kids off at 8 o'clock. So all your morning has been spent screaming at your kids to get ready. Hurry up. Who cares if you're tired? Get up. It's time to perform for the world, right? Get up. Mom and dad have to go to work. You got to go to school. So you drop them off at 8 o'clock or whatever time people drop their kids off these days. Maybe even earlier, because maybe you got to be to work earlier, and so now they got to go to a before school program. These poor children. And then they sit there all day being bullied, usually, by some adult that has major issues, because I remember it when I was in school. I know it happened to my daughter because I had to go up to bat for her. Too bad I didn't have the sense to just take her out. But you see what's going on. These people are not well, and they should not be with our kids. There are some good teachers, but listen, it is a stupid thing to send your kids to someone who is a total stranger. You don't know what they're teaching your kid. And then what do? We punish them for not getting the grades. We reward them when they do function for the world according to the world standards. All day long, they're in their carnality. How do you ever expect them to get into the heart and spirit where God is when you force them to be in their carnality all day, and then we punish them when they don't do it? And then we get off of our jobs and we go pick them up from school or their aftercare program. They've spent all day being raised by strangers, many of them who are complete lunatics. We bring them home, stuff their face with some food. Oftentimes these days, these poor kids are not even getting a good home-cooked meal or participating in cooking the meal, in harvesting the food, that's the life that God set up. It's spoken of throughout the Bible. And then it's time for shower, brush your teeth, go to bed, do your homework. It wasn't enough that they were gone all day. Now they got to come home and do homework. Do you see what that system of education has done? It has coveted the most important role we have as parents, to raise our children to God. It has coveted it and required us to get on board with raising our children to the world. How sick. And then what happens? We raise our children to become adults who esteem themselves and identify themselves by the wisdom of this world. That's what the world rewards them for. That's what we reward them for. And what does God say about these things? He rebukes the wisdom of our carnality. So that's what we've raised our kids to. Sick. It is sick and it is anti-Christ. God does not value that wisdom, and so it should not be a surprise to you that he had me relinquish my doctorate, give up my career, and he did the same thing with my daughter. She gave up her doctorate right when she got it, but she also gave up all of the promises that the world had made to her, all of the hard work that she did, the life that she thought that she might build with her husband. She gave it up to do what God has her doing, which is raising her son. And you know what the word says about that? That those who have left fields for his sake, yes, that was their livelihood, working in fields, but we've also left our fields. That was our livelihood. Those who have left fields for his sake, mother, brother, sister, father, and homes, will receive 100 times as much in eternal life. I choose that, and so has my daughter. All right, so how is this going to happen, this fall of Babylon the Great? Well, you need to understand that the false prophet has to fall first. And the false prophet is the kingdom number 7 in Revelation 17. And who is the false prophet going to fall to? Well, in Revelation 13, we see that the image of the beast is the one who is wielding power. It is the face of counterfeit Christianity, of the Antichrist at that time. And so the United States will fall to Israel. And as it is, I have demonstrated for you in recent videos that is exactly Netanyahu's goal. He wants to be the superpower. He wants to make Israel the world's superpower. And what is Netanyahu doing right now? What are Israel Zionists doing right now? They are persecuting people who will not bow down to them. This is not yet the reign of the Antichrist, but that image is already doing exactly what it's going to do next year when it rises. So the United States has to fall, and we've already begun to see the fall of the United States. If you can't see that, Lord help you. You should be able to see it. And the word does say that people are going to be shocked when they see this Antichrist rise. I'm telling you right now so that you can be prepared, so that you can return to God and he will return to you. I'm not speaking out apart from the Bible. The crazy thing is that so many people will listen to these delusional, self-proclaimed prophets online tell them all of these things that have no biblical backing whatsoever. I show people exactly where it is in the Word. I let them know this is what God has told me, and here's where it is in the Word. And people call me a cult. Really? I don't even have any secondary gain for the things I say to you. People will go to some counterfeit church and pay a pastor who's telling them to sow a blessing, whatever that means. They'll go and send their children to youth camps with youth pastors that are grooming young girls. I don't have any physical contact with you guys whatsoever, and no secondary gain. It's so incredible what people will accept these days. It seems that they will do anything to avoid the actual truth. And they will condemn anyone in order to justify themselves, including God, and the word so states it. How is this fall of Babylon going to come about? In Revelation 18, there's a heading here in the NIV version that says, Lament over fallen Babylon. Well, unfortunately, those headings are made by man. This is not the fall of Babylon. This is the fall of Babylon the Great. And how do we know that? Because it says, after this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven. He had great authority, and the earth was illuminated by his splendor. With a mighty voice, he shouted, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling for demons and a haunt for every impure spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable animal. For all the nations have drunk the maddening wine of her adulteries. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries. Okay, so you see that this is Babylon the Great, that she's filled just with total uncleanliness, and all the nations have drunk the maddening wine of her adulteries, her false doctrines, and the way that she has committed adultery with the prince of this world. And then it says the kings of the earth committed adultery with her. So the kings, this is a political issue. She's been fornicating with the kings, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries. What's a merchant? Just someone who's selling a product. And the prostitutes that bore out of her are selling her product. They're selling her prostitutions, her adulteries, her maddening wine. They are selling it. They are a marketplace. Remember when Jesus flipped over the tables and said, stop making my Father's house a marketplace? Well, he said it for a reason. So then there's a warning to escape the judgment of Babylon the Great. Again, unfortunately, the heading says warning to escape Babylon's judgment. I suppose that's kind of correct. It would probably be more correct to say Babylon the Great's judgment, because if you are choosing her, then you belong to this Babylonian kingdom. But it's correct nonetheless, because if you choose her, then you are part of Babylon. So it says, come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues, for her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her crimes. Give back to her as she has given, pay her back double for what she's done. Pour her a double portion from her own cup. Give her as much torment and grief as the glory and luxury she gave herself. Right? Because she's a marketplace. Counterfeit tithing. Tithing was fulfilled, guys. Tithing was always part of sacrifice. So either Jesus came and sacrificed for you or he didn't. That is the tax that goes out to maintain the royal splendor in Daniel 11. That is not legit tithing. God himself does not need your money. Sacrifice was offered in order for you to understand what you're supposed to be giving to God of yourself. Go give the money to the poor. Do you see how these prostitutes are living? They're flying private jets and they've got multi-million-dollar homes and they're tax exempt. They completely exploit you. In her heart she boasts, I sit enthroned as a queen. I'm not a widow, I'll never mourn. Therefore in one day her plagues will overtake her, death, mourning, and famine. She will be consumed by fire, for mighty is the Lord God who judges her. Now in Daniel 7, when the Antichrist is reigning and persecuting God's holy people, it says in Daniel 7:9, as I looked, so Daniel's having this vision, thrones were set in place and the Ancient of Days took his seat. So he's roused from his dwelling. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated and the books were open. Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking. Okay, so that's the Antichrist, or the image of the Antichrist. I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. Okay? So the beast is slain, its body is destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. That is not, as we discussed earlier, the destruction of Babylon is when it's thrown into the blazing fire. That is not the fall of Babylon. You need to understand that. The other beasts had been stripped of their authority, but were allowed to live for a period of time. So these other kingdoms had been allowed to live for a period of time. You're going to see why. God's making an example of Babylon the Great. And you can see here in Revelation 18:9, you're going to see that the kings are still alive. And they're watching what's happening to Babylon the Great. So listen to what it says. When the kings of the earth who committed adultery with her and shared her luxury see the smoke of her burning, they will weep and mourn over her. Terrified at her torment, they will stand far off and cry, woe, woe to you, great city, you mighty city of Babylon. In 1 hour your doom has come. So what is God doing? He's terrorizing them, watching this fall. And by the way, this is occurring after the resurrection. So it goes resurrection, bowls of wrath, fall of Babylon the Great, and the wedding supper of the Lamb. Then Christ comes back with his bride, and he slays them in the battle of Armageddon, slays them with the double-edged sword coming out of his mouth, and he throws the beast, the Antichrist, into the lake of burning sulfur, and he throws the false prophet in the lake of burning sulfur. That is their destruction. As you saw in Daniel 7, their destruction is when they are thrown into the blazing fire. Now, I want to be careful because verse 12 says the other beasts had been stripped of their authority but were allowed to live for a period of time. They are also going to be thrown into the lake of burning sulfur at the same time. So the way that this is written, and we know that from the way that things are laid out in Revelation, because the beast is thrown into the lake of burning sulfur at the same time. There's not like a separate time. So all Daniel is saying is I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body was thrown into the blazing fire. And then in parentheses, it says the other beasts have been stripped of their authority, but were allowed to live for a period of time. I don't believe that what it's saying, based on what we see in Revelation, I don't believe that what it's saying, it can't be. It can't be saying that the other beasts are living for a period of time after it's been thrown in the lake of burning sulfur, because the way that Revelation is written is it says the entire beast. And these other beasts are being worn by the Antichrist. It's described that way in Revelation 13:17, that the beast is seen as having 10 horns, which are 10 kings, and 10 crowns, which represent authority, and 7 kingdoms. When this comes down, they're all coming down in terms of destruction. But in terms of falling, she's going to fall, and they're going to stand far off and cry, because essentially they know they're next. That's why. So back to Revelation 18, verse 11, the merchants of the earth. Now, who are the merchants? We know who the kings are. They're the 10 Germanic tribes that became Western Europe. They have one purpose. God has put it in their heart to, this one purpose, to give their power and authority to the beast. That beast is wearing these 10 kings. So it says the kings are committing adultery with her and sharing in her luxury, and they are seeing the smoke of her burning, and they're weeping and mourning over her, terrified at their torment. They stand far off and cry, woe, woe to you, great city, you mighty city of Babylon. In 1 hour your doom has come. Now the merchants, what are these? The prostitutes that bore out of her. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, because no one buys their cargoes anymore. Cargoes of gold, silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen, purple silk. It sound like a marketplace to you guys? And scarlet cloth, every sort of citron wood, and articles of every kind, made of ivory, costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cargoes of cinnamon and spice, of incense, and myrrh, and frankincense, and wine, and olive oil, and fine flour, and wheat, cattle, and sheep, horses, and carriages, and human beings sold as slaves. That's for sure. Human beings in these prostitutes are being sold as slaves to the devil. That is exactly what's happening. They will say, the fruit you longed for is gone from you. All your luxury and splendor have vanished, never to be recovered. The merchants who sold these things and gained their wealth from her will stand far off, terrified at her torment. Why are they terrified? They know they're next. They will weep and mourn and cry out, woe, woe to you, great city, dressed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls. In 1 hour, such great wealth has been brought to ruin. Every sea captain and all who travel by ship, the sailors, and all who earn their living from the sea, peoples, multitudes, languages, and nations, that's how it's defined will stand far off. When they see the smoke of her burning, they will exclaim, was there ever a city like this great city? They will throw dust on their heads and with weeping and mourning cry out, woe, woe to you, great city, where all who had ships on the sea became rich through her wealth. In 1 hour she's been brought to ruin. Rejoice over her, you heavens. Rejoice, you people of God. Rejoice, apostles and prophets, for God has judged her with the judgment she imposed on you. With the judgment she had imposed on you. Why? Because she's drunk with the blood of God's people. Okay, so it's gone through this whole description, and then it talks about the fall of entire Babylon. Then a mighty angel picked up a boulder the size of a large millstone and threw it into the sea and said, with such violence, the great city of Babylon will be thrown down, never to be found again. The music of harpists and musicians, pipers and trumpeters will never be heard in you again. No worker of any trade will be found in you again. So, no worker of any trade, no merchants. The sound of a millstone will never be heard in you again. And it goes on to talk about what is never going to be heard again. And then it says, your merchants were the world's important people. Your merchants were the world's important people. By your magic spell, all the nations were led astray. In her was found the blood of prophets and of God's holy people, of all who have been slaughtered on the earth. Okay, so you might think that if this Antichrist, this, even though Jesus says that a divided kingdom will not stand, we get this idea in our head that, I think some people actually think, okay, well then there's no divided kingdom, right? No, there's a divided kingdom. This is a divided kingdom, and that's exactly what God is describing here. And when he makes that statement, he's talking about this divided kingdom that is not going to stand. Even in Daniel 2, he talks about it being a divided kingdom, partly of iron and partly of baked clay, two materials that do not adhere to one another. It's a divided kingdom. In Revelation 17, the beast of the Antichrist is seen as having 7 heads, 10 horns, 10 crowns. So let's read it. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, with precious stones and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast, which you saw, once was, now is not, yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. Okay, remember that from the perspective of John, in the vision, he's in the 6th kingdom, in the vision, not in real life, but in the vision, he's in the 6th kingdom. And so that's why this angel is telling him that the beast was, now is not, but will rise again. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain for only a little while. That's talking about the 7th kingdom of the false prophet of the United States. So why does it remain only for a little while? We've already been told in Revelation 13, because it has 2 purposes: testify to the beast and set up the image of the Antichrist. The beast who once was and now is not is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. That's the Antichrist, the final Antichrist of the end, or the, culmination of the Antichrist is the best way to say it, because essentially everyone's been harvested into this kingdom who's going to be in that kingdom. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom. These are the 10 Germanic tribes that became Western Europe, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. Now, it doesn't say that about the false prophet of the United States. The United States will fall to this beast, but these 10 kings will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose. False prophet had two purposes: testify to the beast, set up the image. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. That's all they're good for. They will wage war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will triumph over them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. Okay, so remember when we talked about the sea a little bit earlier and I said that? The word has already defined what that means. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin. Now listen to this. The beast and the 10 horns, so those 10 kings, they will hate the prostitute and they will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Who are we talking about? We're talking about the 10 kings, and we're talking about the beast, meaning all the prostitute daughters that bore out of her are going to turn on her. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. It's kind of weird that, like, when they see her fall, that they're crying. For God has put it in their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over to the beast their royal authority until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. It is kind of peculiar, isn't it? From Revelation 17 to 18, that you're hearing that they're going to hate the prostitute, they'll bring her to ruin and leave her naked, they will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. But then in Revelation 8, they're like, woe, woe to you, Babylon. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries. They're turning on her. They're bringing her to ruin. They're weeping and mourning over her because no one buys their cargoes anymore. They're not really crying over her. Do you see that? Okay, now we have to take into consideration what has gone on up to this point. What has happened up to this point is that the resurrection has taken place. The bowls of wrath have been poured out. And now they're turning on Babylon the Great. Oh, this is so good. I was struggling to come to what it was that God wanted me to talk about here in this video, but I knew that there was something that he wanted to reveal, and so I just I put everything away and was like, okay, I'm going to go do this. Think about how you would feel. The resurrection has occurred, okay? Everyone's seen him, even those who pierced him. So no one is going to miss that event. There are those who are going to participate in the first resurrection and actually go with Christ, but everyone's going to rise from their tombs and see this. So what's happening after the resurrection is that God's great wrath is continuing. And the reason I say continuing is because it starts on the 1290th day when he's roused from his dwelling. And it continues up to the 1335th day, and somewhere in those days, the resurrection takes place. We don't know the day or hour, but we do know the number of days, so let's not be stupid. We're told numbers of days in the book of Daniel. So the resurrection takes place, and then the bowls of wrath are poured out. So these people have been going through it. And I would imagine that the jig is up, and they are upset with their harlot mother, because certainly they never take responsibility for themselves, right? I mean, let me tell you something. You know how many people I've told about Christmas and Easter and the image of the cross and the counterfeit Sunday and Saturday Sabbath, counterfeit tithing? I mean, these are basic things, you guys. Basic things that any pagan should be able to understand that that's not Christian. But do you know that those calling themselves Christian love their Christmas, love their Easter, love their counterfeit church? They love all that stuff so much that they will completely ignore the things that I say. They don't care about truth. But do you think they're going to take responsibility at this time and say, oh my goodness, I loved, falsehood more than truth. God has rejected me as his priest because I rejected knowledge. Yeah, I don't think so. So you see what they're doing is they're turning on their harlot mother. They're mad at her because she deceived them, right? And I've seen this. This is a dime a dozen. My goodness. If I could just tell you how many people have done this, where they're so mad, they come out of their counterfeit church, they start hearing the church, and they start hearing the truth, and the jig is up, and they come out of that church, and they're like, that pastor, oh, that prophet, Mary Baker Eddy, they all deceived me. Woe is me, they all deceived me. No, the word says that you're deceived when you don't love truth. It's because you didn't love truth and you need to figure out what happened. Did you not go to his word? What happened that you were deceived? Take responsibility. And the very people who will not take responsibility end up in another cult. I have seen it time and again. It is so annoying, but it is so textbook. And the reason why is because they don't take responsibility. I'm telling you, the thing that you will not deal with is going to be the thing that takes you out. We've all been deceived, but we can't hide behind somebody else's responsibility. This is like adults who are still acting like turds and blaming their parents because their parents ruined their lives. No, you don't get to do that. You should acknowledge what has gone on with your parent because you need to heal. But you don't get to keep blaming your parent for the reason why you are engaging in sin today. You have to go be healed. Because guess who gave you that parent? God did. And he has known exactly what he was going to do with that situation in order to build you. You either believe that or you don't believe in a sovereign God. So that's what's going on here. These guys are upset with her because they've been going through it and now they're turning on her. So I always read this as they were like grieving over her, but they're not. They're mourning over her only because no one's buying their baloney anymore. The product they're selling. Oh, that is such righteous judgment. Okay, God knows what he's doing. Okay, so Babylon's fall is not like a surprise to them. It's something that they're doing to Babylon. Or Babylon the Great, rather. They're burning her with fire. They're eating her flesh. So she's fallen, and now the wedding supper of the Lamb has taken place. They're allowed to live for a little longer because they're gathering for the Battle of Armageddon. And that's when Jesus comes back with his bride and fights that Battle of Armageddon, which really is not. It's not like a fight in the flesh. Jesus slays everyone with the double-edged sword coming out of his mouth. What's sharper than a two-edged sword, guys? The word. So they're being convicted. They're being tormented by conviction. And the false prophet and the Antichrist are thrown into the lake of burning sulfur. Awesome. I just love that God keeps having me reiterate this, summarize it again, and then he brings in new information. It's so fantastic. He's so good, and he's so faithful, and so brilliant. Is this not brilliant what he does? I mean, who would ever think about these plot twists that the very image that counterfeit Christianity is worshiping is the image that's going to persecute? It's actually the image of the Antichrist. Who would have ever thought that? And that the fall of Babylon the Great is coming at the hands of those who bore out of her. Oh my goodness, this is just too much. Okay, well, I know at least 5 other people who are going to be super excited about this revelation. I hope you are too. I hope this means something to you, but not as a form of entertainment, guys. As a form of, you're hearing the truth. Now at least do what I've asked you to do. Do what the word has asked you to do. Go discern this with God. And if you're discerning it to be true, then you need to know that now is the time you need to return, because come next year, you will not return once the Antichrist has risen. The Bible states it. So it's not me saying something to fearmonger you. It's me saying something to warn you of what is actually written in the word. Please go discern this with God.